Good afternoon, Tim. How you doing?
Good afternoon, Shaba. I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good. I've just returned from the GP surgery for my travel vaccination for my trip to Nepal. So
Mm.
feeling a little bit heavy in my left hand. So I don't know whether that's going to affect the podcast today, but I think I should be okay.
All right, we're not going to ask you to do any shadow puppetry or anything. So I think we'll be all right. Or lift any weights. So
No,
I
no,
think we're
no.
okay.
I'm holding my pen in the right hand just
Very
to.
good. Yeah. You've
Okay,
had your health and safety
exactly.
briefing. Good. Yeah.
Exactly. So today we are going to dive into something that's cropping up an awful lot with my clients and in the world that I work in. And it centers around the tax that everyone kind of dislikes, which is the inheritance tax. Which, for those that don't know who are listening, inheritance tax is 40% on your estate when you pass away. You leave over a certain amount, you lose basically 40p in every pound. And this causes quite a big concern for many of my clients. And with asset prices going up over the last, 10, 20 years quite aggressively, the allowances remaining the same, a lot more people are getting caught into this trap of inheritance tax. So it's an area that keeps us quite busy and on our toes in ways of trying to help clients save on this particular tax. It's just raised some really interesting conversations with clients where I'm starting to notice,
Mm.
their sort of worries, concerns, fears, etc., and also the dynamic between the generations as well. So I thought this is a really good topic to get your insight on, and
Mm.
maybe we can explore that today.
Sounds good. And we're recording on Monday, 3rd of November. And I think there's a budget at the end of the month here in the UK in like 3 or 4 weeks, something.
There is, and so whenever there's a budget, I think people kind of get a little bit riled up on various issues, and this particular budget, I think, has come with a fair amount of doom and gloom as a
Mm.
precursor because of the state of the UK's finances and just
Mm.
a general sort of feeling of things aren't going very well and
Well,
in the economy.
also, it's an aside, but I think that our current government and the Chancellor, whatever you think of their policies, they chose from the beginning their communication was as being to tell us how terrible things were and are. And I experienced them as a bit locked into a doom and gloom kind of story. And then I think that's stupid politically because we all get sucked into it. But anyway, that's a
That is
podcast on
quite true.
political
Yeah,
communication. I think it does
that
pull people into a pessimism, and that in itself shifts behavior.
certainly does. So,
Yeah. All right. So inheritance tax. I want to say something even before we dive in. You're going to more lead this conversation because you're having these conversations. You're getting to hear how people are grappling it. Not so much part of my world. What I would say from my world, where I work with a whole range of people, as you know, on money and the unconscious and what's going on for them. First of all, I hear what you say. House prices, asset prices have increased. More people are pulled into it. But I think I'm right in saying that still the majority of people in this country will die and not have to pay any inheritance tax because their estates will not be large enough. Is that still true?
I don't know the statistics off the top of my head, but I would say that as you move away from sort of the south,
Yes.
central London, the
Yeah.
southeast, as you head further north,
Yeah.
perhaps, I think the majority of people there will not fall into this trap.
Right.
So it's one of those first world problems, nice to have kind of thing.
It's a worry that comes only with a certain amount of financial privilege. And
Yeah.
I want to say that for two reasons. One is people might be listening to this thinking, well, my parents gonna not leave me anything because they can't. So I think there'll still be interesting stuff in
Mm.
this podcast for you because we're talking about inheritance tax, but we're actually talking about the emotions and feelings that the whole topic surfaces.
Yeah.
So I want to acknowledge many people will be listening for whom this isn't an actual issue, but I think this will still be very relevant. And also, as you say, more and more people are caught up, we might say, or affected by or liable for inheritance tax because more people are being pulled into that. So I want to acknowledge that, and it really is an issue for people. And also it involves death and bequeathment and all of these stuff. And still, you have to be relatively privileged in order for it to be an issue. So we're already in interesting territory where if we look at it just logically, you have to be doing relatively well, or at least have a house that happens to have high value, right? On the other hand, it can feel, as you're going to go on to say, I know people have very strong emotions. They can feel it's very unfair. So
Yeah.
even that tells us we're in quite a charged money field. I just want to notice a couple of other things. Even in your introduction, you probably didn't notice. You described it as it's the tax everyone dislikes. And I was thinking, what's the tax everyone likes? I couldn't think of one, right? I couldn't
Yeah.
think of one. I don't know, but there is something about inheritance tax, I agree, that seems particularly emotional for people. And we could maybe
Mm.
talk about that. And then you refer to it several times as a trap, the trap of inheritance tax. So it's like
Mhm.
before we even dive into what your clients are saying or what might be going on, hopefully to help people think about it, I notice there's already this sort of, it's the one we particularly dislike and it's a trap, even though some people don't have enough that they don't even have to pay it. But there's something there that feels really quite
Mm.
gnarly.
Very gnarly.
So let's dive in.
Let's
What are
dive
your,
in.
yeah.
Yeah. So in my conversation with clients, and an opinion that I kind of subscribe to as
Mm.
well, just looking at things the way they are. People are just feel that it's bloody unfair, right? It's a
And what's
bloody
unfair?
unfair. Well,
What do they think's unfair?
I think the argument is centered around,
Mm.
well, throughout your life, as you earn money, you're taxed on your income and the things that you buy, VAT, you're taxed on the things that you spend on. So the assets that you then accumulate, and let's use property as the
Mm.
example, which is the biggest asset for a lot of people. So, you've paid your mortgage, you've paid for the deposit, all of this has been paid out of income that's already been taxed by
Mm.
the government. The things that you've bought and the way that you've upkept your house, etc. Again, a lot of tax would have been paid along the way. And then house prices have gone up over the years. But I think what people also look at is the allowance that you get to pay zero tax on has remained pretty much still for the last decade and a bit, like
Which is
that.
classic government way of increasing taxes without increasing
Exactly,
taxes. Yeah.
exactly,
That's
exactly. So,
and they've done that with income tax too,
of
haven't they?
course,
And income tax bans and yeah.
and maybe that's the trap bit where people
Yeah.
are getting sort of a little bit trapped in that situation.
Mm.
Yeah. So I think people are then feeling, well, at the end of the road, once I pass away and I want to leave behind
Mm.
the the assets that I've accumulated, they are then subject to another tax, which is quite a hefty 40%
Yeah.
of an estate of a certain value in the UK, above a certain threshold. But above that threshold, which is now for quite a lot of people, that, as we said, in the south, in and around London, it's very easily eaten up by the 0% allowance that you get given.
Yeah, yeah. So they
Um,
feel it's unfair.
and they feel that this is just
Yeah.
bloody unfair.
Okay.
And I've had conversations with people who have been contributing to the working of the community and the country at large, etc. So, no gripes around that, but this just feels like it is.
Mm. It's interesting.
So
Okay.
yeah, that's the
So
first bugbear.
let's dive in. Let's dive in. I want to say very clearly that I don't really have a political view on inheritance tax, or at least if I do, it's extremely vague. I haven't articulated it. There is no part of what I'm about to say here that assumes I have a particular view, right? And that's really important because I might say some provoking things or some confronting things, but where I'm coming from is from the depth psychology of money emotion. I'm not making a political judgment, right? What I love is to get a gig with, the government treasury to help them with whatever tax policies they do, to help them understand some of the psychological and emotional impact. Because like most economists, they'll be thinking of it in numbers and spreadsheets and with their left brain, and it might all make sense. And as you and I know, even if it makes sense, or even if it's this tax, they've done calculations, how it feels can be completely different. But I want a public disclaimer. I am not making political or policy points here. Having said that, what I notice, as you know, in the money work is I'm always tuning into highly charged words that people use to describe different money scenarios. And we've talked about this in previous podcasts with buying socks, going on holiday, 100 things. Okay. So when I hear people complain that something's unfair, it draws my attention, not about a policy, to where is fairness and unfairness in different parts of this system. Okay. And it draws my attention as a psychologist in what are they not noticing? Because it sounds like the story goes something like this, and tell me if this is correct. Joe Bloggs says, it's unfair. The government is unfair. The policy is unfair. In other words, the unfairness is in the tax because I, Joe Bloggs, I have paid my taxes. I've worked hard. I've been sensible. I have played by the book. I am fair. So the fairness is with me and the unfairness is with the government or the tax. And therefore, and I don't, I've even paid my tax. I haven't avoided taxes. I'm not like those horrible unfair people, Amazon or whoever. Right? I've done the right and proper and fair thing, and now I'm being clobbered. Okay. So what I'm hearing is a mindset where the fairness is on one side and the unfairness is another. There's a split. Okay. Now, in this work, we say wherever there's a split, I tend to identify with one side. I don't see the other. And the healing, the resolution always comes when I see that I am and have always been both sides. So I might say, and this is an easier step, I might say, well, on one level it is unfair, but the government is trying to be fair. So maybe the government's trying to raise a certain amount of revenue. By the way, I'm not making a political point. I'm saying psychologically, yes, it's unfair, it's horrible, I don't like it, blah, blah, blah. But also maybe there is some fairness there that I'm not seeing because they have to raise certain money. And if they didn't raise it here, they might raise it another. And that would disadvantage a different group. And only some people get to see. So one step is I could say, instead of it's unfair, I don't like it. It worries me. It sucks. It means there'll be less money. But I can see there is fairness and unfairness out there. That's one step. I'll take one more step and then I'll see how you respond. The more personal step is this. Let me give you an example of my mum. My mum, who's 80, owns a house in North London that it must be worth over £1 million. My mum bought that house 60 years ago for, I think, £10,000 or less, which to them at that time was a huge sum. They didn't know if they could afford it. They weren't very well off. And now it's worth over £1 million. And it's not a liquid asset, but when she dies, the house will be sold, there'll be some money. Is it fair that she owns a house worth £1 million? She has paid her taxes, but she's done nothing really. It just happens to be London. And that increase, and this is true anywhere in the country where house prices increase, is to do with an absolute multiplicity of things, some of which are random, some of which are very unfortunate. I mean, I think house prices are terrible thing. But many of which are funded by government, like, there are schools and roads and transport systems and train stations and hospitals, right? But none of which have been anything to do with my mum, bless her, other than buying the house. So I could say of £1 million, we've got to pay blah, blah, blah inheritance tax. That's unfair. But I could also see equally true, the fact that that house is worth that amount is a completely random, unfair. I don't mean unfair in a pejorative sense. I mean, it's not fair. She could have bought somewhere else and it's worth less. She could have bought a house by the seaside and now she can't get insurance because of climate change and the house is worth nothing. Or she could have bought a house, I don't know, somewhere where now it's under an airport somewhere. So it's all a bit random. So that's a bit of a rant. What I'm trying to point out is, however I feel about it, can I recognize there is fairness and unfairness on both sides? And does that help? What do you think?
Oh, I feel like you've just snookered me
Oh,
straight off the bat.
I'm
No,
not trying to
no,
sneak.
I know you're not, but it's. I hear what you're saying, and it's true because we don't actually stop and think about that side of the equation, which is, I've benefited immensely from whatever this, the privilege, the luck, the
Yeah.
The economic environment, the inflation of the asset, because the
Yeah.
government's been printing loads of money over the decades. All of these things that I'm just like, yeah, this is true. Like, what's contributed to this? Purely sort of accidental from the owner's point of view, because they didn't really buy it to think, oh, well, in 60 years' time, this is going to be worth
No, I mean,
£1 million.
what's happened more recently, maybe 30 years ago, is people did start buying houses as investments and
Yes.
assets. And I actually regard that as a big part of the problem. And we could talk about that another
Yeah.
time. But no, she was a young
Yeah.
married woman 6 years ago. What's that? 1965? Literally didn't know if they could afford it. They bought the house, and all right, 6 years later, it's worth 1 million. It's
Yeah.
unfair. Now, we could argue about how much money her estate should be able to keep and how much should go to the
Yeah.
government, but we can't say she's done much to deserve or earn that money, or certainly us as her beneficiaries have. It's all a bit random. Could we consider ourselves blessed to get anything? Could we consider ourselves blessed to have been brought up in a nice house in a
Yeah.
nice part of London? Could we be aware that many people would have neither of those privileges? I might still prefer to have lots of money when my
Right.
mum passes away.
Yeah.
Of course I might. I might love the fact if there was no inheritance, that might be super. But do I need to tie it up with a perception of fairness and unfairness? Or is that a way of not seeing the ways in which my life and various things that have come to me are also unfair? And that's okay. That's how life works.
Yeah, I mean, look, in the majority of cases, it's clearly a one-sided argument in terms of it's me, 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 and
Right.
poor me, and the acknowledgement of the privilege in the other side. I get that, and I've never actually thought about it in those terms. And it almost feels like there's this sort of, I don't know if divine right is the correct
Mm,
term, but this is
mm,
mine. And
mm.
how dare anyone take it away, because, this is my endeavor. And
Yeah.
it's actually quite interesting. I don't know how I would broker this conversation with a client.
Mm.
Quite a
Yeah.
delicate situation, but it's definitely a tricky one. So, okay. So let's say we do acknowledge both these sides.
Yeah.
Where do,
Well, let's take another couple of steps because you see, what I think is the more we can start to acknowledge both steps, and I'm saying to everyone listening, whether inheritance tax is a reality or an issue or on the horizon or whatever, this is true for all money work, right? I tie up often a strongly held feeling or emotion with some money thing, then I think those two things go together. So the first step which we've explored a lot in previous episodes as well, is can I see actually, no, I can disentangle. I am unfair and fair as a person, nothing to do with money. The government or the tax, it has fairness and unfairness in it. Yes, of course, I'd love to receive 1 million rather than whatever, but that's nothing to do with the emotion. So the first step is to disentangle. The more we can disentangle in any money scenario, the emotion from the number, the more I can start to clearly see two things. One is, what might I do with the money? Or what's a good use of the money? Or how do I deal with the money? And the second is, I might see more what's really going on emotionally. Yeah. And because with inheritance, we're talking about bereavement, death, legacy, love, family, all of which are very, very highly charged things, often we might not see really what's going on emotionally. It might be easy just to go, inheritance tax, and then we don't see what's going on more deeply. Can I take one more step about
yeah.
me, me,
And then I'll
me,
come in
and
with something
earning?
that follows up on top of this. But this is good. Yeah, let's go for the next step.
Yeah. Okay. We'll take another. I think there might be 2 or 3 steps. Let's not even look at asset prices, because asset prices, someone might say, yeah, she bought a house. She was 26 with her husband. But okay, I kind of get that. But what about all the money I've earned? And I've been sensible because I have saved and I have invested and now I have pension or now I have investments. That's different. That's not just because I bought a house in London. I earned that. That's my, they shouldn't take that from me. Yeah. So it's a kind of stronger argument. But then, even then, we might see certain things, right? That the fact that we've invested, well, we've maybe had a certain degree of education capacity, advice to do that. The fact we've had discretionary income to do that. That's great. There is a lot that we may have done there. So it's both sides. There's There is an independence, and it's very good if people do that for themselves. But also, it's a privilege to have the education, the wherewithal, the advice, the discretionary income to invest, right? And to live in a society where those assets have gone up because we haven't had a war, we haven't been invaded, we haven't, COVID only lasted 5 years rather than 20 or 30 years, right? We all saw what happened with asset prices during COVID. Even with investments that I can think of, that's me and my skill and my hard work. Even then, we can't be totally independent. We rely on those asset prices rising, or our investments, or whatever we call them, with a whole host of factors, many of which, again, supported by society, government, a whole load of factors outside of our control. And again, I can argue about how much should stay with me and go to the government. But the idea that, let's say I have a pension pot of 1 million, for sake of argument, the idea that it's unfair that that's not all mine because I've created all of it. I'm not so sure it's true. I get that it might feel irritating that I've already paid taxes on my income. I get that I might like to have more of the money. But the idea somehow I've achieved that only through my hard work, or down to me, or that the government or society has had no role in even my investments increasing, I'm not sure I can support that.
What's the difference between this feeling of, okay, I'm upset and irritated and quite
Mm,
maybe angry at the
mm,
situation
mm.
versus tying something up with it? Because for me, it still seems like, well,
Yes.
you're still pissed off, so
It's a great question. I guess what I would say is, in a way, I'd offer that question to the listeners, right? I can give you some ideas, but if I'm feeling very irritated about any money situation, could be my husband or wife goes out and spends too much on a new handbag or new golf clubs, and I'm irritated, right? So that's a smaller example than inheritance tax, but let's use that. I notice. Point is, I think I'm irritated because of the money. That's the entanglement. I think I'm irritated because he bought golf clubs. It's obvious. He shouldn't have done that. We spent too much. And then I run with a story. And in my mind, it makes perfect sense that my anger and the spending, the handbag, are like that.
so one's caused the
Well, that's what I
yeah,
think. I not even cause. I normally think it's so obvious that they shouldn't have done that. It's bad, naughty,
yeah,
stupid, reckless. And then I'm irritated. And when I'm like that, I don't ever investigate what is my anger really about. Right. So I'd say it's the same. I'll come on to this
yeah,
politically with inheritance tax. So what I need to do is consider, okay, first step, I'm not really angry because of some numbers or some shiny lumps of metal that certain men like to swing and hit balls. That's not making me angry. That doesn't make sense. But something's making me feel angry. So I get a bit of space. Then I might sit with it. But the first step is to feel that I'm angry or upset or whatever, and to know it's not the golf club or the money that's doing that to me. Similarly, I might feel angry, irritated, disappointed, badly treated, and realize it's not inheritance tax that's doing that to me. Then I can think, well, what's actually going on here? And then let's take my wife buying a handbag. If I sit with that, I might discover something about what's actually provoking emotion for me. And it might be something like, well, I make an example because it could be very different to
mm,
different people. She's very good at treating herself and buying, but she never does nice things for me. That might not even be true, but I'm closer to the feeling. There's a relational thing here that's causing
yeah,
me pain or anger. And rather than feel that pain and realize it's relational, and we maybe need to have a conversation, or do I need to talk about my needs, or do I need to look after myself? There's a whole host of things that I can work on. I just go, how could they spend all that money on? So
mm,
that's what I mean about the difference between no problem witnessing or experiencing it,
yeah.
just have enough space. Then I might sit with it. Then I might discover what am I actually angry about here. And that might lead us to another step with inheritance tax. But let me pause there.
Yeah, that's almost like just blown my mind. I don't know. We talk we talk about this so much, and I'm just like, shit. Yes, that's it. It
What
just
a
shows. Well,
thing.
it's almost like it's. I'm going to use the word misdirected anger,
Indeed.
but I don't think misdirected is the correct word. But it's almost like the guns are facing in the wrong direction because you're so focused on the inheritance tax number 40%, okay, well, if it was 20%, would you feel better then? Those are the experiments we kind of play. Well, what level of inheritance tax would make you feel that that was acceptable? The same ways, what price, what price of handbag would have been acceptable for you not to have been enraged or felt whatever it is, that the feeling.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
it's not about the nut, because it's just ludicrous
No.
that if the handbag went from, 100 quid down to 90,
Yeah.
you might actually not have the same level of reaction. There's obviously
Yeah.
something else going on, which we know. So that's
Yeah.
just, I don't know, just
And
hit me,
someone,
hit me again.
that's right. And it's no different. So someone listening might go, well, that's not true, because actually if inheritance tax was charged the same as income tax, it would be all right, Tim. So well, all right, I realize that, but it's still not in the number. What you're saying is at a certain level, I'd start to feel more okay. We can still investigate. So
Mm.
let me ask this as an open question. I'm not expecting you to know the answer. Let's have a dialogue. And again, I invite listeners to think about this. So let's say I might feel many things around inheritance tax, and I want to talk about two. I might feel angry, it's unfair. And I also might feel sort of, well, if I have to pay more, I might have a sense of kind of vulnerability, like my children will be left vulnerable. Okay. So I want to treat them as separate, although I don't believe that they are. What might I be angry about around this if it's not the number of inheritance tests?
I,
It's a difficult question, so
I
we'd
mean,
have to ponder it.
I think it's just worth throwing a few things out
Yeah,
there without
yeah,
sort of dwelling. But and this is just fascinating for me to now be able to talk about this with my clients, because I think it opens up
great.
such a great conversation, but also it offers a very nice segue into, well, more informed around what to do with the money,
Indeed,
right? So I
indeed.
think this,
Yes,
because if you're in a state of anger, frenzy, whatever, you're not
yeah,
going to make the best decisions
no,
with the money. So I think this is so vitally important. And I think it goes for many sort of money kind of transactions or interactions, that when you get clear on this stuff, boy, can you just make some better decisions.
yeah,
But coming
yeah.
back to the inheritance tax around
Mm, mm,
the anger of the unfairness, as
mm.
opposed to, I think, the other one, which you were saying, the vulnerability is more of a worry or an anxiety or
Yeah, we'll
concern.
come on to that one.
Yeah.
I think we need to
So
separate them.
I think that it's one of the things that I've picked up on, the unfairness and anger is that, well, I've worked hard. This is mine, and someone's taking it away from me. So
Interesting.
I think it's more on principle
That's interesting.
rather
Yeah,
than
it
anything
might be.
else. So that could be one of the things that it almost feels like my sovereignty in this area is being violated.
Okay, so let's stay with that. I had a different thing in mind, but there could be many. This is
Yeah.
super interesting. My sovereignty is being violated. Something about me. This is mine, and it's being taken
Yeah.
away. Well, I make two observations. One comes back to what we've already talked about. In a way, it is yours, but also it's been created by the whole of society. I think it was Warren Buffett who's the money I've made isn't possible without all the roads and all the buses that transport the workers to the
Yeah.
places that I invest in. And Bill Gates said, look, if I'd born at another time and hadn't gone to my high school where they had a computer, Microsoft wouldn't exist. So even the most self-made man, and I use man deliberately, is both an independent individual who has made their money and utterly dependent on the fabric of
Yeah.
society, right? So part of what you're saying, the anger is it's taken away from me, is the illusion of my independence. We need to recognize we're dependent. Going deeper, it's very interesting. What did you say? I didn't write the phrase, but it's me, it's my sovereignty. We're talking about getting old and dying. What is the thing that we will all definitely begin to lose as we get old and die?
Yeah.
We will lose our sense of independence on some level. We will lose our sense of physical autonomy and sovereignty.
Yeah.
We will become more and more dependent on others. And I wonder if buried in there somewhere, this fixation on me and I made it and look what I've done. And partly there's a collective delusion that we're all dependent on others anyway. And partly as we get older, move towards death, it becomes more and more the truth of our dependence and the truth of our we're not invulnerable sovereign individuals only becomes clearer. And that's very, very hard for some people to handle. So I wonder if there's a deeper emotional
Yeah.
layer there.
I was just saying it could almost be akin to mourning the loss of
Yep.
your
Yeah.
mortality.
Yes. Yeah.
And this is just like, well, I'm losing, it could be mobility, it could be, so many different things as you
Yeah.
get older. And this is like everything kind of is now projected onto the number, and they're bloody taking this as well.
Yeah, but I think most people conscious it's not even as well.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's easier me to focus on them
The
taking my money
yeah.
than on the universe gradually taking my strength and my
Yeah.
vitality and my life,
I
because
see that.
that's not an easy thing to look
Yeah.
at. And also, as we've explored in other podcasts, for many people, they make a positive projection onto their money. My money is my power. My money is my strength. My money is my success. And the bastards are taking it. And again, that reflects back to me kind of a weakening. So I
Yeah.
wonder if there's something in there. So we've talked about two things so far. I want to
Yeah.
mention a third, and then we maybe take another step. So one is, yeah, many of us in Western society have the illusion of the heroic individual,
Yeah. So this
right?
idea that my legacy is now at stake almost, in a way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, two. One is I made the money,
Yeah.
it's mine. Whereas actually, no, yes, you did, but society has helped
Yeah.
you. You've had many supports and helps and encouragements and luck. And then, yeah, the sovereignty is, as I die, it's hard to let go of all of that. That's going to be taken away. I want to offer another perspective. Let's be more specific, because that was quite existential, right?
Mm.
Death. And I think that's part of it. The government's taking my money. Now, let me ask you a question. Again, I'm not making a political judgment or a party political policy thing. If I felt I lived in a really good society, like things were really arranged very well, everything worked, the trains worked, health worked, provision, social care for old people and sick people were like I really felt I was in a good, healthy society. And by the way, then when I die, I really feel my children, whatever situation, are going to be okay because we live in this great society. Like it works. People are taken care of and
Yeah.
treated well and da 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 da. Do you think, well, how would I relate to the fact the government wants 40% of whatever when I die?
I mean, I think that if people had optimism and
Right.
a vision, or just a very strong feeling that the future was going to be better for their children,
Yeah.
for their grandchildren,
Yeah.
society was, like you said, operating and flourishing, I think a lot of people would be comfortable with the fact that their money was going towards that better future. So yeah, something I'd like to, would have to be tested out, because I don't want to speak for everyone.
No, and we
But
don't know. And yeah.
I would certainly feel that in my own situation, even if we just looked at, let's say, paying a bit more income tax, for example, which I
Yeah.
think is something that we can all sort of, well, I think a lot of people would say, well, I don't mind paying higher tax, but if, like you
Yeah.
said, we have a better functioning society.
Yeah.
um,
So again, we can't get away from death and the
yeah.
waning of our powers, and we need to recognize we're part of a web of relationships. None of that's about wider society. But yeah, it seems to me two things. One is when I really worried about what I pass on to my children, it's partly an anxiety. I mean, it's love, but I'm afraid. I'm afraid life is really, really tough. And I'm afraid that house prices are going crazy. So it's kind of love and anxiety and various things combined. But the point is, if I really trusted I was dying in a good, healthy society that takes care of everyone, I think I could let go of my money to the
Mhm.
government more easily. So in terms of my anger at the unfairness, I wonder if remember, we're saying often the anger you said is misplaced or it's tied up in the
Mm.
inheritances. I wonder if I'm really angry, not with the government, but I'm angry with the society I live in. It's let me down. It's an unfair society. It doesn't treat people well. I wonder, the things that I feel the inheritance tax is doing, it's taking away stuff. It's not treating me well. It's not respecting all the work I've done. I wonder if there's a projection there where I'm angry with how we've got to where we've got to in society and how people are treated, not just me and my pot, but how people are treated. And I'm angry that it is unfair. I don't mean the money they're taking from me is unfair, but there are homeless people on the streets. One in however many horrible, I know 3 or 4 children is in poverty.
Yeah.
Old people are dying and not getting social care and not being looked after. People are having their teeth rotten because they can't pay. And I wonder if it's easier for most of us to feel angry about the tax and try to protect our children than to acknowledge how let down, disappointed, and angry we feel. And I don't mean this government or the last government, but something about the way together we're creating
Mm.
society. And I want to pause there because I wonder what you think, because there might be implications then what we might do with our money if that became more conscious.
Yeah, I think that that could be valid concern for a lot of people,
I mean, unconscious. I'm not saying people are necessarily conscious of it.
as in unconscious.
I'm not thinking because that would be more political. Some people would
Yeah,
be conscious and some people wouldn't. I wonder if on a deep level outside of awareness, people feel this sort of thing.
I don't know either. It's not something that I've thought about too much in terms of I think we've talked about my own battles with privilege, poverty, and money on on a couple of occasions in the podcast. And the system does seem that it's inherently kind of unfair in the way that resources are allocated, etc. Like I said, we're privileged and greedy,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
as well. But whether that's feeding into people's misplaced anger, I'm not sure. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's worth
No,
thinking
well, I
about.
offer it. I offer it as a question. I just want to be clear. I'm not saying it's conscious because I think that would split more around
Yeah.
kind of party political, capitalist type lines, right? I just wonder if when people come to the end of their life, and and these are big things to experience and
Mm,
to admit, which is why I think it might be unconscious, and they realize they don't have confidence that the future generations will do better than them. They don't have confidence that their children will be taken care of regardless of what happened. That they might feel quite disturbed or angry about that. And what they might wish is to be able to die knowing, if you think traditionally, life's always been very tough for people, traditionally. But also, usually we die and our children would be in the community and they would die within a web of relationships in the village, in the tribe, in the community. So, on the one hand, we die knowing life is precarious. But on the other hand, we die knowing somehow there's still part of something that will do its best to support them after we've gone. And I wonder if people don't feel that anymore. And I don't know. I'm just exploring the ideas here. The step I'll take, and then maybe we can say one more thing and draw it to a close. Is what interests me is if I did feel that, then maybe one thing to do with my money, as well as worrying about inheritance tax, while I'm alive, would be to use as much as my money to support projects, causes, campaigns, things in my community, anything that actually builds a better world while still looking after myself and my loved ones. But
yeah.
it's almost like holding on to the money because the government's going to take it away so I can look after my children, which is a good thing to do and understandable. Then that money for people who do have assets becomes less free to actually help create the society we
Yeah.
might want. So we get a complicated paradox.
Yeah. And that was one of the things that we were talking about before.
Mm,
This idea of, I think when you disentangle
mm,
the emotion with the number or the percentage of the tax rate or whatever it is,
mhm.
it allows you to make better decisions.
Yeah.
And one of those decisions that I come across with a lot of clients is, when we're doing the planning, which is optimizing for numbers, but
Mhm,
actually what we want to do is we want to optimize for life,
mm,
and this idea of giving with a warm hand as
mm,
opposed to a cold one, I think speaks to exactly what you've just said. Now, it could be helping causes, making society better, but it could be, giving with a warm hand allows your children to embark on their life path, or resource them so that they can go away and do what it is that they would, truly enjoy and bring them life, energy,
mhm,
vitality, as opposed to them receiving it,
mhm,
from the executives once you're,
mhm,
6 feet under. So I think that
mhm,
ties in quite nicely, that idea. And I think it would just lead to some really powerful conversations with
mhm,
clients, because it's like, actually, we can be still smart about the money and optimizing for tax and all of those things. And like we always say, we're not poo-pooing that but we're not letting that just hoodwink us into a certain direction of travel, because ultimately what's the money for, right? And I think that's a great way of for people to think about their own planning. If they don't use someone, or if they do use someone, it's really getting clear on how could this money be used for good. But it can only happen once you've disentangled.
Yeah, but the question itself can also help you
Yeah,
disentangle. So
yeah.
so doing the inner work and disentangling, finding what you're really angry about and facing some of that quite uncomfortable stuff, that helps. So, because you'll know clients will come to you and they'll be in a quite a tense or anxious or angry state. So actually even asking an appreciative question, what is it you really wish for those who come after you? Forget about money. Forget about money. No, don't
Mm,
worry about what is the life you really wish for them? Because that's a life-centered question. What is the society you really want them to live in? Are there any parts of society that are really important to you that you would love to be particularly healthy? You can ask life-centered questions about how do you want life to be when you've gone
mm.
for your children, their children, society. And then the question might be, rather than how do we organize inheritance tax and might be, how can we use your assets now so you have a beautiful life and your money can support the life you really wish for your children and the
Yeah.
society you want them to grow up in? It's a very different energy. The phrase that came to my mind when you said giving with a warm hand or a cold hand, I would add, can I give with a warm hand or a cold hand? Can I give with a warm heart
Yeah.
or a cold heart? Because if I'm giving a gift, because actually it's a way of minimizing tax, because I'm caught up in anger and resentment and a sense of unfairness, then even if my gift, when I'm still alive, is well intentioned, I would say it's coming a little bit from a cold heart and a cold grasping hand, even though I'm alive, because I'm doing it a little bit to minimize tax. Not totally, of course. But if I'm really warm hearted and think, how can my money serve life, my children, and maybe the life of society, both now and when I happen to be elsewhere on my journey, not here in physical form, then there's a different thing. And by the way, if I'm really angry with society or the government, what will I do with that with my warm heart? And do I write to my MP? Do I get involved? Do I support things? That's not going to make the difference by itself. But again, it's following the impulse of what actually I want in life and society and being more intelligent about what's bothering me and doing that now while I'm alive with my money and also without my money.
I think that could be the place to wrap up for today, Tim. Do you want to quickly have a couple of takeaways for the listeners
I think, yeah.
based on what we've discussed?
I want to say one more thing, which is a takeaway. Again, for people listening to this who aren't going to receive inheritance and aren't going to leave inheritance, I would say don't forget all the things that we leave, that we create in our lives and leave that are nothing to do with money, right? So we haven't got into this today, but you and I both know inheritances can cause the most tremendous problems and conflicts and upsets. And there's no guarantee that with a money inheritance, good comes of it. You'd agree with that. So that's another sign that it's never in the money. If I think that my inheritance is about love, support, helping my children, the question is whether I have money or not. How do I actually love, support, help, enjoy my children now, whether I have it or not? So I would offer that as a question to
Mm,
anyone listening. What you truly leave your children is never money. I mean, you leave money, but you leave a whole load of, you leave
yeah.
memories, you leave teaching, you leave education, you leave all the stuff you never said that was never expressed. You leave the example of your life that they get to follow, right? So whether you've got money or not, what is it I truly want with my warm heart to leave behind to those I love and to my society? And how do I do that now as fully as possible with whatever money I have? That would be one. And if I am fortunate enough, for whatever reason, to have money and to figure out how much to give now and how much when I die, how do I use that money and make decisions with that money with a warm heart in service of life, not just with a cold heart trying to avoid the taxman, even though I would understand that. They're two life-centered questions around inheritance.
Perfect way to end, Tim. I'll see you next time.
See you, my friend.